What happens with a pandemic here in the United States when we're the only country in the developed world that doesn't have a national health care structure? Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, and share it with your friends. So there's this virus coming out of apparently out of a wild animal market in Wuhan, China, a city of 10 million people. And it has spread literally all around the world. We were just discussing, is it in South America and Africa yet? I'm not certain about those two continents, but, I think it's just a matter of time. This thing is moving around. And there's two considerations here. The first, and I'll get to the second in a few minutes, but which is that Wuhan is kind of the Detroit of China. And I want to get to the consequences and impact of that. But the first is that if a possible pandemic, in other words, we have 5 cases of this confirmed now in the United States. And one of the people who died in China day before yesterday was one of the doctors in one of the hospitals that's treating these folks. So, healthcare workers are at risk. There's just, a substantial concern, shall we say, around this virus. Here we are, the United States of America, supposedly the strongest, richest, most powerful country in the world. In fact, it looks like China is a little richer than we are, and their middle class is certainly much larger than ours, and et cetera. But here we are, number one, and we are literally the only developed country in the world without a coherent national health care system and infrastructure. We have 20 some odd million Americans who have absolutely no health insurance. We have over 100 million Americans, and frankly, I think you could make the argument that it's probably closer to 200 million Americans, particularly if you include the 1/3 of seniors who are on Medicare Advantage using privatized, for-profit health insurance rather than Medicare. That probably 2/3 of us are underinsured. Our insurance will crap out if we get really sick. And we're looking at a pandemic? This is the strongest argument that can be made for Medicare for all, for a national single-payer healthcare system, like Canada has. Like France has, like Germany has, like Spain has, fill in the blanks, right? Like every developed country in the world has a national health care system, except the United States. Now, President Obama tried to give us a national health care system. It was imperfect. It relied on the profit motive. It relied on, heavily subsidizing the health insurance industry. But, President Obama tried. This was like a mid-step, God bless him, with Obamacare. And it would have covered everybody in America. It would have done it, at twice the expense of any other country in the world, with most of the profits going to the health insurance industry and the for-profit hospitals. But it would have worked. But John Roberts and 4 other conservatives on the Supreme Court blew a hole in the side of that, saying that Republican-controlled states could opt out of Medicaid expansion. And as a consequence of that, we've got tens of millions of people in this country with literally no health insurance and the possibility of a pandemic coming to our shores. And what do people who don't have health insurance or who are underinsured, who have $5,000 deductibles, and they're that 50% of Americans who could not survive a $500 expense? What do they do when they get sick? They stay home. Or they even, if they're facing an economic hard times, and most of them are, we're talking, the bottom half of America economically, if they don't go to work, they probably don't get paid because they're hourly rather than salaried employees, or they don't have sick time or sick days, or both. And so, they go to work and they spread contagious diseases. This is, we got 35,000 Americans who die every year from the flu, which is exacerbated by this exact same situation. The guy at the, in the cook or the busboy or the person hauling plates around in the restaurant where you're going to eat this week almost certainly does not have health insurance. And if that person has the flu or has a virus or has anything and sneezes on their hands or sneezes on your plate, you wouldn't even know it. And boom, we're getting sick just from going out to dinner. Every other country in the world has figured out that a national health care system is part of their national security infrastructure. And in fact, this is how it was presented by Franklin Roosevelt, for God's sake, when he proposed it back in the 1930s. By Harry Truman when he proposed it in the 1940s. By Lyndon Johnson when he proposed it in the 1960s. The Republican opposition to a national health care system literally goes back a half a century or more. I mean, it goes back to the 30s. That's nearly a century. And a national health care system, first of all, it would cut our health care bill in half. We pay twice as much as Canada pays, and you don't see sick people in Canada as a result of their health care system. You don't see a situation in Canada where people go to work and spread diseases or don't go to the doctor and get sicker and sicker and infect more and more people because they can't afford to go to the doctor. You just don't see it in Canada. We have that here in the United States right now. Odds are the person sitting next to you on the bus or the Uber driver driving your car, particularly if they're in the early stages of an infection when they're contagious but they're not all that symptomatic, hasn't gone to the doctor, won't go to the doctor because they can't afford it. This is in all probability going to turn into a worldwide battle. China is building 2 hospitals right now, and it's going to take them 3 weeks to put these hospitals up around the city of Wuhan. Franklin Roosevelt, in his second Bill of Rights, said health care should be a right. He also said education, including college, should be a right. Housing should be a right, and decent pay in your work, and in fact, the presence of a job should be a right. So if the capitalist system, if our economic system fails to provide a job at all, or fails to provide a job that pays well, if it fails to provide a job that pays well, we're going to change the rules of the game so that employers have to pay well. And if there is no job, the government will create one. That was what the WPA and the CCC and all these other programs, the National Reconstruction Administration, which the Supreme Court struck down in the early 1930s. It's what led to FDR's court packing scheme. That's what those things were all about. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is straightforward stuff. And it's time, in my opinion, for all of us and for the Democrats. I mean, this is a marvelous opportunity for the Democrats who support a national single-payer health care system. Even if it's a watered-down one like Buttigieg's. For Democrats who support a national health care system of any sort, but the one that actually covers everybody, like Obamacare was intended to do, to say this isn't just about saving $1 trillion a year. This isn't just about making sure that people have the right to get health care when they're sick, just, a basic human right. This is also about the security of the United States, the national security of the United States.